are moments in life when the road seems endless, when the burdens on your shoulders feel too heavy to carry. You've cried in silence. You've wrestled with doubt, and you've asked, God, are you there? And the answer, my friend, is yes. He is with you. He has never left you. He walks beside you even when you cannot see him. A man once lost everything: his job, his family, his home. He wandered the streets broken, empty, alone. He screamed at the heavens, "Why, God, where are you?" And as he fell to his knees in despair, a stranger reached out a hand, lifted him up, and said, "You are not alone." That moment changed everything, because it wasn't just a man who reached down. It was God working through someone else. You may not see him in the storm, but he is the shelter. You may not hear his voice in the darkness, but he is the light. And when your strength is gone, when your heart is weary, it is his arms that carry you. Moses stood before the Red Sea with an army behind him, fear in his heart. "Lord, what now?" he cried, and God said, "Move forward." He didn't tell Moses to run. He didn't tell Moses to fight. He said, "Step forward and I will make the way." The waters parted and the impossible became possible. You see, God doesn't always remove the storm, but he gives you the strength to walk through it. He didn't keep Daniel from the lion's den, but he shut the mouths of the lions. He didn't prevent David from facing Goliath, but he placed a stone in his hand and courage in his heart. Right now, you may be standing at the edge of your own Red Sea. You may be facing lions in your life. You may be staring at a giant that seems impossible to defeat. But listen to me, God walks with you. He has not forgotten you. He has not abandoned you. Every tear you've cried, he has seen. Every prayer you've whispered, he has heard. A young woman once lay in a hospital bed, weak, frail, told she had only months to live. The doctors shook their heads. The people around her lost hope. But she held on to one thing: faith. "I am not alone," she said. "God is with me." And against all odds, she rose from that bed, not because of medicine, not because of science, but because of the power of God. You are not defeated, you are not forsaken, and you are not walking this road alone. When you step forward in faith, mountains move. When you trust him, doors open. When you believe, miracles happen. So hold your head high, stand strong. The battle is not yours, it is the Lord's. And he walks with you. There are moments in life when we feel completely alone, like we're walking through a valley with no end in sight. The silence can be deafening, the weight unbearable, and the questions relentless. God, where are you? Why can't I feel you? Have you left me? But the truth, the unshakable, undeniable truth, is that God is always present, even when we can't see him. Imagine a child learning to ride a bike for the first time. The father holds onto the seat, running alongside, steadying the child with each wobble. The child may not always feel his father's hand, but it is there, guiding, protecting, ready to catch if they fall. And just like that, God is running beside you in your journey, even when you can't see him, even when you feel like you're on your own. He is there, steadying you, keeping you from crashing. Life is filled with trials that make us question his presence. The loss of a loved one, the sting of betrayal, the pain of disappointment, these moments shake us to our core. We cry out, desperate for a sign, desperate for reassurance that he has not left us. But faith is not about always seeing, it is about believing. Just because the sun is hidden behind the clouds doesn't mean it has disappeared. Just because God is silent doesn't mean he is absent. Look at the story of Joseph, betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, thrown into prison for a crime he didn't commit. Years passed, and it must have seemed like God had forgotten him. But God was there, working behind the scenes, preparing Joseph for something greater. When the time was right, Joseph was elevated to a position of power, and every hardship he endured had a purpose. You may not understand why you are in the season you're in. You may feel abandoned, but God is still writing your story. Every tear you've shed, he has counted. Every prayer you've whispered, he has heard. He has never taken his eyes off you. Even in the silence, even in the waiting, he is walking with you, guiding you towards something far greater than you can imagine. You are never alone. There are times in life when we feel like we are drowning in our struggles, crying out for help, only to be met with silence. We wonder if God hears us, if he truly sees what we're going through. But what we often fail to realize is that God works in ways we don't always expect. He is not absent. He is present, moving through people, circumstances, and even hardships to bring about his divine plan. Think about a man stranded on a deserted road, his car broken down, his phone with no signal. He prays desperately, "Lord, send me help." Minutes pass, then an hour, no miracle, no sudden rescue, just silence. Then in the distance he sees an old truck rattling toward him. A stranger stops, offers him a ride, and takes him exactly where he needs to go. That wasn't coincidence. That was God working through someone else. The answer to the man's prayer didn't come with flashing lights or angelic voices. It came in the form of an ordinary person with an extraordinary purpose. God's presence is often revealed in the kindness of a stranger, the unexpected call from a friend when you need it most, or the sudden peace that fills your heart when anxiety should consume you. He places people in our lives to lift us when we are weak, to encourage us when we are weary, to remind us that he is near. We pray for deliverance, and he sends someone to walk with us. We pray for provision, and he opens a door we didn't even know existed. Consider Ruth and Naomi. Naomi lost everything: her husband, her sons, her security. She believed God had abandoned her, that her life was over. But God was working through Ruth, a faithful daughter-in-law who refused to leave her side. Ruth's loyalty and love were not just acts of kindness. They were evidence of God's hand at work. Through that relationship, Naomi found hope again, and Ruth became part of a lineage that led to King David and ultimately to Jesus Christ. God is not distant. He is not indifferent to your struggles. He moves in the details, in the people he places around you, in the moments that seem small but carry great significance. Open your eyes, open your heart. He is working through every situation, every connection, and every act of love. There comes a time in every person's life when they stand at a crossroads, staring at a challenge so great that fear grips their heart. The road ahead looks impossible, the obstacles too overwhelming. In that moment, doubt whispers, "Turn back, stay where it's safe." But faith says, "Move forward." Because faith is not about seeing the entire path, it is about taking the first step, trusting that God will make a way. Moses stood at the edge of the Red Sea, an entire nation behind him, an army in pursuit, and nothing but a vast body of water ahead. Fear must have flooded his mind. The people cried out in panic, demanding answers, pleading for escape, and then God spoke, not with a detailed plan, not with an easy way out, but with a simple command: move forward. That's it. He didn't split the sea first. He didn't give Moses a map. He just said, step. And when Moses obeyed, when he raised his staff in faith, the impossible happened. The waters parted and the path appeared. This is how God works. He doesn't always reveal the entire journey. He doesn't always show you every step. He asks you to trust him enough to take that first one. A person struggling with a dream hesitates, afraid of failure. A mother facing hardship wonders how she will provide for her children. A man battling addiction questions if he has the strength to overcome. And to each one, God says, move forward. Do not wait for everything to be perfect. Do not wait until you have all the answers. Step out in faith and watch what he will do. Peter was able to walk on water, not because he had the power, but because he had faith. The moment he took his eyes off Jesus, fear pulled him under. That is what happens when we focus on the storm instead of the one who controls it. The challenge ahead of you is not greater than the God who walks with you. Fear tells you to retreat, but faith calls you forward. You may not see the way now, but when you trust him enough to step, he will clear the path. He will part the waters, and he will lead you exactly where you need to go. Take the step. Move forward. God will make the way. Life is not without its trials. There will be moments when the weight of the world presses down so heavily that you wonder if you have the strength to go on. You pray for the storm to pass, for the hardship to be lifted, for the challenge to disappear. But sometimes, instead of removing the obstacle, God gives you the strength to walk through it. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den not because he did anything wrong, but because he remained faithful to God. He could have pleaded for the situation to change, for the punishment to be revoked, but God didn't stop Daniel from entering that den. He shut the mouths of the lions. The danger was still there, the threat was real, but Daniel was untouched because God was with him. That is how he works. Sometimes he doesn't take away the storm, but he stands with you in the middle of it. David was a shepherd boy standing before a giant. The odds were impossible. No one believed he could win. But God didn't remove Goliath from the battlefield. He gave David the courage, the skill, and the strength to fight. The battle wasn't eliminated, but the victory was secured. God didn't take away the fight, but he gave David everything he needed to overcome. There will be times when you face your own lions, your own giants, your own storms. You may be in a hospital room hearing a diagnosis you never expected. You may be standing in a courtroom facing consequences that shake you to the core. You may be looking at an empty bank account, wondering how you will make it through. And in those moments you might ask God, why aren't you taking this away? But what if his plan is not to remove the struggle, but to strengthen you in the middle of it? What if he is giving you everything you need to overcome? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown into a fiery furnace, but they were not alone. A fourth figure stood with them, God himself. The fire did not consume them, and they came out without even the smell of smoke. That is what God does. He doesn't always put out the fire, but he stands with you in it. You will not be consumed. You will not be defeated. You will walk through the trial and you will come out stronger because God is with you. There are moments in life when everything seems to fall apart. The plan you had, the future you envisioned, the dreams you cherished, all suddenly shattered. You stand in the wreckage asking, why, God? Why me? What did I do to deserve this? But what if the very thing you see as an obstacle is the thing God is using to shape you? What if your struggle has a divine purpose that you cannot yet see? Joseph had dreams of greatness, dreams of leadership, dreams of favor, but his journey was anything but easy. His own brothers betrayed him, threw him into a pit, and sold him into slavery. He was falsely accused, thrown into prison, and left to be forgotten. If anyone had a reason to believe God had abandoned him, it was Joseph. But through every hardship, God was working. The betrayal led him to Egypt. The prison led him to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's favor led him to a position of power that not only saved Egypt, but also saved his own family, the very brothers who betrayed him. What seemed like a series of cruel misfortunes was actually the hand of God leading him to his purpose. You may be in a season of pain right now. You may feel lost, uncertain, or broken, but God does not waste pain. The thing that seems like your greatest setback may be the very thing that sets you up for your destiny. That failure, that rejection, that heartbreak, it is not the end of your story. It may be the very thing God is using to mold you, strengthen you, and prepare you for something greater. Look at the life of Job. He lost everything. His wealth, his health, his family, his friends told him to curse God. His wife told him to give up. But Job refused to let his suffering define his faith. He held on to God even when he didn't understand. And in the end, God restored everything he had lost, twice as much as before. The suffering had a purpose. The pain had a meaning. You may not see it now, but your struggle is not without reason. God is writing a story far greater than you can imagine. What feels like an ending may be the beginning of something new. Hold on. Trust Him. Your pain has a purpose, and in time you will see that He was working all along. There are times when the weight of life feels unbearable, when the nights are long and filled with tears, when the silence of heaven makes you wonder if your prayers are even being heard. You cry out, you plead, you beg for answers, but all you are met with is stillness. And in that silence, doubt creeps in. Does God really see me? Does He care? Has He forgotten me? But hear this truth. Every tear you have shed, He has counted. Every prayer you have whispered, He has heard. Not a single cry of your heart has gone unnoticed. Even when you don't feel Him, He is there. Even when you don't see a response, He is working. The silence of God does not mean the absence of God. Hannah wept bitterly before the Lord, longing for a child, praying year after year while others around her received their blessings. She must have wondered if God had turned His face away. But in time, God answered, and her son Samuel became one of the greatest prophets in history. Her prayers were not ignored. They were being prepared for the perfect moment. Lazarus lay sick, his sisters desperate for Jesus to come. But Jesus delayed. Days passed, and Lazarus died. To those who loved Him, it must have seemed like God had abandoned them, like their cries had gone unheard. But Jesus was not late. He was right on time. When He arrived, He didn't just heal Lazarus. He raised him from the dead. Sometimes God's delay is not His denial. Sometimes what looks like a closed door is just the setup for something greater than we ever imagined. God has never ignored you. He has never overlooked you. He sees the battles you fight in silence. He knows the burdens you carry that no one else understands. He hears the prayers you can't even put into words. And though it may feel like nothing is changing, like heaven is quiet, He is moving in ways you cannot see. You are not forgotten. You are not unseen. The God who placed the stars in the sky, who knows every hair on your head, who calls you by name, He is listening. And when the time is right, He will answer in a way that is greater, deeper, and more powerful than anything you could have ever imagined. Keep praying, keep believing. He is working. Fear is a powerful force. It whispers in the dark, reminding you of every failure, every weakness, every reason why you should give up. It tells you that you are not strong enough, not smart enough, not capable enough. It tells you that the mountain before you is too high, the storm around you is too fierce, and the battle ahead is already lost. But fear is a liar, and faith is greater. There was a woman who had been sick for 12 years. She had spent all her money on doctors, searching for a cure, desperate for relief, but nothing worked. Nothing changed. Then she heard about Jesus. Weak, exhausted, broken, she pushed through the crowd, telling herself, "If I could just touch his robe, I will be healed." She didn't wait for an invitation. She didn't let fear stop her. She didn't listen to the voices that told her she was too far gone. She reached out in faith, and in an instant she was healed. Faith does not look at the size of the problem. It looks at the power of God. Faith does not focus on the storm. It focuses on the one who walks on water. When Peter stepped out of the boat, he did what no man had ever done before. He walked on water. Not because he was special, not because he was strong, but because he had faith. The moment he took his eyes off Jesus, fear pulled him under. That is what happens when we let doubt take over. But even then, Jesus reached down and pulled him back up. That is the God we serve. A God who does not let us drown. The enemy wants you to believe that your situation is hopeless, that the sickness cannot be healed, that the dream will never happen, that the addiction will never break. But the enemy is a liar, and faith is greater than fear. Faith moves mountains. Faith opens doors. Faith breaks chains. There will be moments when everything in you wants to quit, when fear tells you to turn back. But hold on. Keep believing. Your breakthrough is coming. The miracle is already on its way. And when you stand in victory, you will see that fear never had any power to begin with, because faith was greater all along. There comes a point in every battle when the weight feels unbearable, when exhaustion sets in, when the voices of doubt grow louder. You have prayed, you have fought, you have done everything you know to do, yet the enemy still stands before you. The mountain hasn't moved, the breakthrough hasn't come, and in that moment fear whispers, "You are alone, this fight is yours and you are losing." But that is a lie. The battle is not yours, it is the Lord's. David stood before Goliath, just a boy with a sling and 5 stones. The entire army of Israel had trembled in fear, convinced that the battle was lost before it even began. But David saw something they didn't. He saw a God who had never failed, a God who had delivered him from lions and bears, a God who would not abandon him now. He looked Goliath in the eye and declared victory before the first stone was even thrown. He did not fight in his own strength. He did not rely on his own ability. He knew that this battle belonged to the Lord, and with one stone, the giant fell. When King Jehoshaphat faced an overwhelming army, fear gripped his people. They were outnumbered, outmatched, and unprepared. But instead of panicking, Jehoshaphat sought the Lord. And God's answer was clear. Do not be afraid. The battle is not yours, but God's. Instead of sending warriors to the front lines, he sent worshipers, people singing praises to the Lord. And as they worshiped, the enemy was thrown into confusion and defeated themselves without Jehoshaphat's army lifting a single weapon. You are not fighting alone. The battles you face, whether they are financial, emotional, spiritual, or physical, are not for you to carry alone. You may feel like you are standing in front of a giant, like you are trapped between an army and the sea, like you have no strength left to keep going. But the God who parted the Red Sea, who brought down the walls of Jericho, who raised Lazarus from the dead, that same God fights for you. Do not surrender to fear. Do not give in to doubt. Stand firm, lift your head, and remember that you serve a God who has never lost a battle. He is working even now, moving in ways you cannot see. Victory is already written, and when the dust settles, you will stand, not because of your strength, but because of His. Through every trial, every storm, every moment of doubt, one truth remains unshaken. God walks with you. He is not distant nor indifferent to your struggles. He is present in your pain, working in the silence, moving in the unseen. The battles you face are not yours to fight alone. The giants before you, the mountains that seem unmovable, the prayers that feel unanswered, none of them are beyond His power. Faith is not about understanding every step. It is about trusting the one who leads you. When fear tells you to turn back, faith calls you forward. When the world tells you it's over, God says, I am not finished. When the enemy whispers that you are alone, His word declares, I will never leave you nor forsake you. You may not see the way now, but God is making a way. You may not feel strong enough, but He is your strength. You may not have all the answers, but He holds the answer to every question. Do not be discouraged. Do not give up. Hold on to Him, because He is holding on to you. The same God who shut the mouths of lions, who parted the seas, who made the blind see and the dead rise, that same God is fighting for you. He is not just a God of history. He is a God of your story. And your story is not over. Your victory is coming. Keep walking, keep believing, keep trusting. Because no matter what comes your way, you do not walk alone. God walks with you.